right. Let's read a fun fact book, like a trivia book tonight. All the presidents of the United States. It's like a fun fact trivia book. Here's the bubble gum. I'm chewing tonight, by the way. Imagine bazooka bubble gum. Use patriotic colors. Be red. These are so soft and they smell so nice. It's very relaxing. Well, Presidents of the United States from Bendon Reading Discovery. I got this for $1 at the Target dollar spot. Distributed by Bendon Incorporated, Bendon Books, out of Ashland, Ohio. Presidents of the United States. Written by Katherine Knight, features official White House portraits. George Washington, 1789 to 1797. Vice President John Adams. Political party none. State representative. He was representing the state of Virginia. And he married Martha Custis. And he lived from 1732 to 1799. It says, General George Washington is called the father of his country. As a general, he helped win the Revolutionary War, and his face is on the $1 bill, and our capital city is named after him. Number 2, John Adams, 1797 1801. Vice President was Thomas Jefferson. He was from the Federalist Party, from the state of Massachusetts, and he married Abigail Smith. He lived from 1735 to 1826. John Adams is called the father of the Navy. He was the father of the 6th president, and he was the first president to live in the White House, and he died on the 4th of July, Independence Day, 1826. Thomas Jefferson, 1801 to 1809. Vice President was Aaron Burr. Oh, he had 2 vice presidents, Aaron Burr and George Clinton. It was a Democrat. His party was Democratic Republican. Weird. That was a party, Democratic Republican. I didn't know that. And I better move this. I'm gonna catch my feather on fire. From the state of Virginia, and he was married to Martha Skelton, and they lived from 1743 to 1826. Thomas Jefferson was an excellent writer and excellent thinker. He wrote most of the Declaration of Independence. He was a governor of Virginia, and his face is on the nickel. He died on the 4th of July, the same day as John Adams, in 1826. Now, that is like unbelievable. They both died on the same exact day, 4th of July in 1826. And that is crazy. How did that happen? I'm going to have to read up on that and see were they like in the same city? What was going on there? Oh, that's crazy. James Madison, fourth president, from 1809 to 1817. Vice President George Clinton and Elbridge Gerry. Party was Democratic Republican. From the state of Virginia, married Dolly Todd, and he lived from 1751 to 1836. And James Madison is called the father of the Bill of Rights. He was the shortest president at just 5 feet 6 inches tall. He was a representative from Virginia, and his face is on the $5,000 bill, which is no longer used. I didn't know we had a $5,000 bill. Cool. I would like to see one of those. Next, the president number 5 is James Monroe. From 1817 to 1825. Vice President Daniel D. Tompkins, Party Democratic Republican. She's from the state of Virginia, married Elizabeth Courtright, and lived from 1758 to 1831. James Monroe was a governor of Virginia, and he implemented the Monroe Doctrine, which said that no European countries could try to colonize land in the Americas. And he died on the 4th of July. This is crazy. How many presidents back then died on the 4th of July? I'm going to have to research this. This is unbelievable. The 6th president was John Quincy Adams, 1825 to 1829. Vice President John C. Calhoun. Democratic Republican Party from the state of Massachusetts, and married Louisa Johnson, and he lived from 1767 to 1848. Okay. John Quincy Adams was the son of the second president. And he was the first farmer president to be photographed in 1848. After his term, he served in Congress for 18 years. 7th president is Andrew Jackson from 1829 to 1837. Vice president is John C. Calhoun and Martin Van Buren. This is interesting. I never knew they could ever have 2 vice presidents. He was from the Democratic Party from the state of Tennessee, and he married Rachel Donaldson, and he lived from 1767 to 1848. General Andrew Jackson was called Old Hickory. He was the very first representative from the state of Tennessee, and his face is on a $20 bill. Our next, Martin Van Buren, the 8th president from 1837 to 1841. Vice President Richard M. Johnson, Democratic Party out of the state of New York, and he married Hannah Hose. He lived from 1782 to 1862. Martin Van Buren was a senator and governor from New York. He was the only president who had to learn English later in life, as he grew up speaking Dutch. And next we have the 9th president. President is William Henry Harrison. He was president in 1841 from March 4th through April 4th for 1 month only. Vice President John Tyler, he was from the Whig Party out of the state of Ohio. And he married Anna Sims, and he lived from 1773 to 1841. And General William Harrison was the grandfather of the 23rd president. And he was a senator from Ohio, and he died in office of pneumonia and served the shortest time of any president, 1 month only. Oh my goodness. Here we have next, 10th President, John Tyler, 1841 to 1845. He had no vice president. He is from the Whig Party, from the state of Virginia, and he married Letitia Christian, who died in 1842, and then married Julia Gardner. And John Tyler was a governor and senator from Virginia. He became president after William Henry Harrison died. He was the first president to get married in office, and he was the father of 15 children. 11th president, James Knox Polk, from 1845 to 1849. Vice President George M. Dallas, from the Democratic Party of the state of Tennessee. And he married Sarah Childress, and he lived from 1795 to 1849. James Polk was a governor and representative of Tennessee. He was president, and the boundaries of the territories of the United States were stretched to the Pacific Ocean. 12th President Zachary Taylor, 1849 to 1850, for only 16 months. Vice President Millard Fillmore, from the Whig Party, out of the state of Louisiana, and he married Margaret Smith, and he lived from 1784 to 1850. General Zachary Taylor was called Old Rough and Ready. He never voted until his very own election. His horse, Whitey, grazed on the White House lawn, and he died after a 4th of July celebration. Oh my goodness. Is that what happens? Is that why they all die on the 4th of July? Because they party hardy so big that they die. That's crazy. And the 13th president is Millard Fillmore, 1850 to 1853, with no vice president, from the Whig Party out of the state of New York. And he married Abigail Powers till she died in 1853. And then was married to Caroline McIntosh. And he lived from 1800 to 1874. Millard Fillmore read the dictionary during breaks as a young mill worker. He was a representative from New York, and his wife Abigail started the Presidential Library in the Oval Room at the White House. Next, the 14th President, Franklin Pierce, from 1853 to 1857. And his vice president was William Rufus Devane King, Democratic Party out of the state of New Hampshire, married to Jane Appleton, and lived from 1804 to 1869. General Franklin Pierce was a representative and senator from New Hampshire. When he took office, he was the youngest president up until that time at the age of 48. Next, the 15th President, James Buchanan, from 1857 to 1861. Vice President was John C. Breckinridge, from the Democratic Party out of the state of Pennsylvania, and he never married. And he lived from 1791 to 1868. James Buchanan was the only president who never married. He was a senator from Pennsylvania, and his eyes were unusual. One eye was nearsighted, and the other eye was farsighted. Next, we have Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, from 1861 to 1865. Vice president was Hannibal Hamlin and Andrew Johnson. Party was Republican, and then in parentheses they have National Union. I don't know what that is. Out of the state of Illinois, and he was married to Mary Todd, and he lived from 1809 to 1865. Abraham Lincoln, known as Honest Abe, served during the Civil served during the war between the states that are known as the Civil War, and declared that all slaves were to be free. He was the first president to be assassinated, and his face is on the penny and the $5 bill. At 6 feet 4 inches tall, he was the tallest president. And president number 17, we have Andrew Johnson. From 1865 to 1869, he had no vice president, and his party was Democratic, and they also, parentheses, have the National Union. From the state of Tennessee, was married to Eliza McCardle, and he lived from 1808 to 1875. Andrew Johnson was a tailor before he became a senator and governor of Tennessee. While he was president, the United States bought the territory of Alaska from Russia. Ulysses Simpson Grant, the 18th president, from 1869 to 1877. Vice President Schuyler Colfax and Henry Wilson, from the Republican Party of the state of Ohio, married Julia Dent and lived from 1822 to 1885. And General Ulysses S. Grant was the commander of the United States Army, and he changed his name from Hiram Ulysses Grant because he did not want his initials to be Hug, H-U-G. Interesting. Wow. And Rutherford Burchard Hayes, our 19th president, from 1877 to 1881. Vice President William Almond Wheeler, from the Republican Party, out of the state of Ohio, was married to Lucy Webb, and he lived from 1822 to 1893. General Rutherford Hayes was a governor from Ohio. He signed a bill that allowed female lawyers to argue cases before the Supreme Court. Next, James Abram Garfield, our 20th president, from 1881, only served 6.5 months. Vice President Chester Alan Arthur, from the Republican Party from the state of Ohio, and he was married to Lucretia Rudolph, and he lived from 1831 to 1881. And General James Garfield was called the Preacher President. He was a representative from Ohio, and he was the first left-handed president, and he was the second president to be assassinated. Oh my goodness. Next we have Chester Alan Arthur, our 21st president, from 1881 to 1885. He had no vice president, from the Republican Party from the state of New York, and he was married to Ellen Herndon, and he lived from 1829 to 1886. What happens if you don't have a vice president and you die? That's kind of, what did they do back then? Who would get it today if both the president and vice president died? Interesting. Married to Ellen Herndon and lived from 1829 to 1886. Chester Arthur became president upon the death of Garfield. During the last 3 years of his term, he was very sick with a kidney disease, but he kept it a secret from all. Next, Grover Cleveland as the 22nd president from 1885 to 1889. Vice President Thomas A. Hendricks, Party Democrat, from the state of New York, and he was married to Frances Folsom, and he lived from 1837 to 1908. Grover Cleveland was the governor of New York. He was the first president to get married in the White House, and he is the only president who served terms that were years apart. Interesting. Benjamin Harrison, our 23rd president, from 1889 to 1893. He was the His vice president was Levi P. Morton, and from the Republican Party, from the state of Indiana, and he married Caroline Scott until her death in 1892, and then married Mary Dimmick, and he lived from 1833 to 1901. And General Benjamin Harrison was the grandson of the 9th president. He was a senator from Indiana, and he became president 100 years after the very first president of George Washington. Next, we have Grover Cleveland, our 24th president from 1893 to 1897. Vice President Adlai Stevenson from the Democratic Party from the state of New York, and he was married to Frances Folsom, and he lived from 1837 to 1908. Grover Cleveland was also the 22nd president. He was the first president to have a child born in the White House, and his face is on the $1,000 bill, which is no longer used. Next, we have William McKinley Jr., our 25th president. From 1897 to 1901. Vice President Garrett A. Hobart and Theodore Roosevelt. From the Republican Party from the state of Ohio, and he was married to Ida Saxton, and he lived from 1843 to 1901. William McKinley was a representative and governor from Ohio. He was assassinated just 6 months into his second term, and his face is on the $500 bill, which is no longer used. Next, we have Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president, from 1901 to 1909. Vice President was Charles W. Fairbanks from the Republican Party out of the state of New York, and he married Alice Lee until her death in 1884. Then he married Edith Carroll, and he lived from 1858 to 1990. Theodore Teddy Roosevelt was an outdoorsman who established 5 national parks. When he took office after McKinley's death, he was the youngest president at 42 years, 10 months, and he won the 1906 Nobel Peace Prize. Next, we have William Howard Taft, our 27th president, 1909 to 1913. Vice President James S. Sherman from the Republican Party out of the state of Ohio, and he was married to Nellie Herron, and he lived from 1857 to 1930. William Taft, known as Big Bill, was the largest president. At 6 feet tall, 300 pounds, as president, he started the federal income tax, and he served as Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Next, we have Warren Gamaliel Harding from 1921 to 1923, our 29th president. Vice President Calvin Coolidge from the Republican Party out of the state of Ohio, and he was married to Florence Kling, and he lived from 1865 to 1923. At age 19, Warren Harding ran a newspaper. He was the first president to receive votes from women. In 1922, he was the first president to speak on the radio, and he died in office while traveling back from Alaska. Calvin Coolidge, next, as our 30th president from 1923 to 1929. Vice President Charles G. Dawes from the Republican Party out of the state of Massachusetts, and he was married to Grace Goodhue, and he lived from 1872 to 1933. And Calvin Coolidge was born on the 4th of July. He was the governor of Massachusetts, and he took office upon the death of Harding and was sworn in by a justice of the peace in Vermont who happened to be his very own father. Next we have Herbert Clark Hoover, our 31st president from 1929 to 1933. Vice President Charles Curtis from the Republican Party out of the state of California. He was married to Lou Henry and he lived 1874 to 1964. Herbert Hoover was an adventurer and became a multimillionaire by the age of 40. He was president at the start of the Great Depression, and after his presidency, he was chairman of the Boys Club of America for 8 years. Next, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our 32nd president, from 1933 to 1945. Vice president was John M. Gardner, Henry A. Wallace, and Harry S. Truman. He had 3 vice presidents. Oh, I see, because he had 3 terms. I get it. Oh my goodness, I get it now. These people that had 2 vice presidents. I get it. I think I get it now. Oh. Okay, so let's see, 33, 45. He was from the Democratic Party of the state of New York, married to Eleanor Roosevelt, lived from 1882 to 1945. Franklin Roosevelt was a 5th cousin to the 26th president. He'd suffered from polio at age 39 and never walked unaided again. He was president during World War II, and he was elected 4 times and served longer than any president. 12 years and 1 month, and his face is on the dime. Next, our 33rd president is Harry S. Truman from 1945 to 1953. Vice president was Alvin W. Barkley, a Democratic Party out of the state of Missouri, and he was married to Bess Wallace, and he lived from 1884 to 1972. And Harry Truman had no middle name. He added the S. He was a senator from Missouri, and a sign on his desk read, "The buck stops here," and he served during the end of World War II. And next we have Dwight David Eisenhower, our 34th president from 1953 to 1961. And vice president was Richard M. Nixon, Republican Party from the state of Pennsylvania. And he was married to Mamie Dowd, and he lived from 1890 to 1869. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, nicknamed Ike, was commander of the Allied forces in Europe during World War II, and he was the first president to serve after the 50th state was added to our union. Next, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, our 35th president, from 1961 to 1963. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson from the Democratic Party out of the state of Massachusetts. And he was married to Jacqueline Bouvier, and he lived from 1917 to 1963. John Kennedy, known as JFK, was the first Catholic president, the first to be born after 1900, and the youngest to be elected. His book, Profiles in Courage, won a Pulitzer Prize. He was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, and his face is on the 50-cent coin. And our 36th president was Lyndon Baines Johnson from 1963 to 1969. He didn't have a vice president in his first term, but the second one was Herbert H. Humphrey from the Democratic Party from the state of Texas. He was married to Claudia Lady Bird Taylor and lived from 1908 to 1973. And Lyndon Johnson, known as LBJ, was a teacher, a rancher, and a senator from Texas. He took the oath of office while aboard the presidential jet Air Force One. Upon the death of Kennedy in 1964, he signed the Civil Rights Act into law. Next we have Richard Milhouse Nixon, our 37th president from 1969 to 1974. Vice President was Spiro T. Agnew and Gerald R. Ford. From the Republican Party from the state of California. Married to Thelma Pat Ryan, and he lived from 1913 to 1994. Richard Nixon was a senator from California, and he was president when the first man walked on the moon. He was accused of being involved in an illegal cover-up and was the first president to ever resign from office. Oh my goodness. Next, Gerald Rudolph Ford Jr. as 38th president from 1974 to 1977. Vice President was Nelson A. Rockefeller from the Republican Party from the state of Michigan, and he was married to Elizabeth Betty Bloomer, and he lived from 1913 to 2006. Gerald Ford turned down a contract with the National Football League. He was a representative from Michigan for 25 years, and he was appointed vice president and then became president when Nixon resigned, so he was never actually elected into office. James Jimmy Earl Carter Jr. from 1977 to 1981 is our 39th president. Vice President Walter Mondale from the Democratic Party from the state of Georgia. He was married to Rosalind Smith, and he lived from 1924 to present day. Jimmy Carter was called the Peanut President because his family ran a peanut farm. He was a governor of Georgia. After his term, he won the 2002 Nobel Peace Prize. And next, our 40th President, Ronald Wilson Reagan, from 1981 to 1989. Vice President, George H.W. Bush, from the Republican Party out of the state of California. He was married to Jane Wyman and to Nancy Davis, and he lived from 1911 to 2004. Ronald Reagan was an actor who appeared in 53 films and a governor of California. He was wounded in an assassination attempt and joked, "I forgot to duck." He was the oldest president at 77 years old for his second term, at 79 years old for his first term. And next we have 41st President George Herbert Walker Bush from 1989 to 1993. Vice President Dan Quayle from the Republican Party out of the state of Texas. And he's married to Barbara Pierce, and he's lived from 1924 to present day. George H.W. Bush was U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and Director of the CIA. He was president during the Persian Gulf War, and he is the father of the 43rd president. And next we have William Jefferson Clinton, our 42nd president from 1993 to 2001. Vice President Albert Orr Jr., Democratic Party, from the state of Arkansas, and he is married to Hillary Rodham. And he lived from 1946 to present day. William Bill Clinton was a saxophone player and had thought about becoming a professional musician. He was governor of Alaska at age 32, and he was president during the launch of the first White House website. Next, we have George Walker Bush, 43rd president, from 2001 to 2009. Vice President Richard Bruce Cheney, Republican Party out of the state of Texas, and he's married to Laura Welch. And he lived from 1946 to present day. George W. Bush is the son of the 41st president, and he was manager of the Texas Rangers baseball team and governor of Texas. He was president during the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, and the war in Iraq. Next, we have Barack Hussein Obama II, our 44th president from 2009 to present day. Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr. from the Democratic Party, Cedar, Illinois, and he's married to Michelle Robinson. And he lived from 1961 to present day. Barack Obama is the first African-American president. His father was from Kenya, and his mother was from Kansas. He was a senator from Illinois, and he won the 2009 Nobel Peace Prize. And here we have presidential quiz. We have 9 trivia questions. Who was the youngest person to hold the office of president? That was Teddy Roosevelt. Next, who was the youngest person to be elected president? And that was John F. Kennedy. And number 3, who was the oldest president? I think that was Ronald Reagan. The shortest president, James Madison. And the tallest president, Abraham Lincoln. And the largest, biggest president was William Tell. I'm reading the answers from upside down there, just so you know. And who was the first president to live in the White House? John Adams. And who was the first president to have a child born in the White House? That was Grover Cleveland. And number 6, which presidents died on the 4th of July? That is amazing. Listen to this. Which presidents died on the 4th of July? John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Monroe. Crazy. Number 7, which president was born on the 4th of July? Calvin Coolidge. Number 8, which presidents had sons who became president? John Adams, and his son was John Quincy Adams, and then George H.W. Bush, his son was George W. Bush, became president. And then, which presidents won the Nobel Peace Prize? Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Jimmy Carter, and Barack Obama. Oh. That was fun. I enjoyed that. I hope you guys liked it too. It was really fun. Thanks for watching.